and welcome to the Practical Engineering Solutions channel. This video is about solar energy and solar installations on your home. Recently, a lot of people have asked me if it's worth it. Well, I have some information about that because I've had two separate solar installations. I have a solar panel array on my primary home for about 9 years, and I've had a solar array on my vacation home for about 3 years. And I've had different experiences with both. So I have a lot of information, I have a lot of background, and I have a lot of performance data. So let's get started and take a look.
So the big question is solar worth it? Well, I thought I'd put together a class. I've had a bunch of my neighbors and some other folks ask me the same question many times, and I've spent countless hours on the phone with them. I have actually two solar installations that I wanted to talk about. One is on my primary home, and that's located in Norfolk, Massachusetts, and the other one is on a vacation home I have down at Cape Cod. This particular picture is of my Norfolk home. It's a two-story colonial. The peak of the roof is about 30 to 35 feet off the ground. The installation was put in 2015, in August of 2015. So I have about 9 years of history on this. And on the house I have, the vacation home down the Cape, I have about 3 years of history there. So I'm going to talk about what was done, how I chose the supplier or the contractor, what the details of the contract was, and also I have a lot of performance information to show how much I saved. So in this particular installation in my primary home, I had 38 panels. The house is not exactly due south. It's about 15 degrees west of south. Didn't seem to matter. It seemed to be pretty good though. No trees overhanging the roof, but the home does back up to woods. So let's take a look at what was involved in my selection of using solar. This was my primary incentive for looking into solar for my home. My utility, Eversource, started to increase its prices. It went from 18 cents a kilowatt hour to about a little over 19 cents a kilowatt hour from April of 2013 to July of 2014. Now that didn't seem like a lot, but as I continued to document the price increase up until April of 2015, the price had two spikes, one in December and one in January of 2015, 23 cents a kilowatt hour and 25 cents a kilowatt hour. And then it dropped back down to 22 cents a kilowatt hour and stayed there until about April 2015. I thought this was kind of high. My low bill for the period was about $177 and my high was $306. Now I have gas that heats my home and hot water. I have central air and I have an electric range and dryer. It still seemed to make me a little bit nervous that it was getting ready to jump up again. Okay, let's take a little bit of a sidetrack in trying to decipher a typical electric utility bill. This is my bill from November of 2023 from Eversource, my utility. At the top is the supplier of my electricity. I've chosen, as you can do in Massachusetts, a separate energy supplier for the generation service charge portion of my bill. This supplier gives me a contract, and it can be anywhere from 1 year to 3 or 4 years, depending on how long-term you want it or short-term. And they're charging me 12.8 cents a kilowatt hour, presumably and hopefully less than Eversource would charge me. So that doesn't sound too bad, $13.28 for 103 kilowatt hours. However, Eversource also adds all these supplemental charges, such as a customer charge, also known as a meter charge, for the privilege of hooking up to the grid every month, distribution charges, transition charges, transmission charges, distributed solar charges, energy efficient charges, and so on. That comes to $38.42. If you use this formula over here and take the total cost of your bill divided by kilowatt hours, it comes up to 37 cents a kilowatt hour, quite a ways away from 12.8 cents a kilowatt hour. So you have to watch this and determine your electric costs based on your total costs, including all of these supplemental charges as I've shown here. Okay, so in 2015, these are some of the choices I made. You could buy the system either with cash or financing. You could sign a leasing contract with an escalator clause, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Or you could buy a lease contract with a fixed charge or a fixed contract price. I also looked at 3 companies at the time, Solar City, Sunrun, and Sungevity, and I reached out to them to give me quotes. I wanted a company with a large national presence and had many resources. It turns out Sungevity has gone belly up. They're no longer around. Solar City was bought out by Tesla. So I guess I was lucky. I picked Sunrun. One other point is that in Massachusetts, there's something called net metering. You've probably heard of it. It's a service that allows a customer to deliver excess energy from their solar array into the grid for credit. So in effect, the grid becomes an unlimited battery for storage. But the credit should be at the retail price, not lower. Some states give you a credit that's a fraction of the retail rate. So you may pay 30 cents a kilowatt hour, but you're only allowed to get a credit of 15 cents a kilowatt hour back as a credit. That's not a good deal. Also, I don't recommend a battery system, because if you're in Massachusetts and you get a full credit for your excess electricity, you don't need a battery. And batteries need to be replaced, usually every 10 years, and they're expensive. So these are some of the pros and cons of buying. If you buy a contract, you don't have a contract at all. I mean, you don't need a contract because you're purchasing it outright. You own the system. If you move, the sale price of the house includes the system. You don't have to worry about that. The pros is there's no payment to the solar company on a monthly basis. You basically you own it. You go in and buy it. Payback is usually 7 to 10 years, which is faster than leasing it. You own all the credits and incentives, both the federal and the state, and you take them each year or when they're available. Also, it would reduce the initial cost of the system by 50% or more. The cons are it's a large out-of-pocket expense, depending on the size of the system. It could be 10 to 50K. You either have to finance that or come up with the cash. Also, the thing I didn't like about it was the homeowner has to chase the credits every year, and they could go down or be eliminated, and you're stuck with that. Also, you may not have an inadequate performance guarantee. And usually maintenance is not included when you buy the system, so the warranty terms and increased property taxes are on you. You have to pay for the warranty, and you may have to pay additional property taxes because you own the system. Also, you're liable for breakage and inverter replacement, which can be significant. Inverters probably last 10 to 12 years roughly, and they're not an insignificant expense. Now let's look at the federal tax credits. In 2024, the federal tax credits were set to expire. They were extended through 2032, and you can still get a credit toward your tax bill if you buy it with 30% of your installation cost. So whatever the system costs, you can get 30% off as a tax credit. In 2033, that credit drops to 26%. In 2034, it drops to 22%. And right now in 2035, there is no more federal credit for residential solar energy. So that's something to consider. And again, the state tax credits can vary as well, which did happen in Massachusetts. They lowered the credits. Now, let's talk about leasing contracts. There's something called a lease with an escalator clause. That means it goes up, the lease cost goes up every year. It's usually a percentage from 1 to 5%, although it can go as high as 7%, but the average is around 3%. Contract term is 20 to 30 years. The pros are it's a lower initial cost. You get a performance guarantee. But while your initial cost is lower, the yearly increase can gradually erode your savings. And maintenance, the solar company owns this installation of panels, so maintenance is included, such as damage due to hail or defects also, but you need to check that. Contract term is 20 to 30 years. The longer the contract term, the greater the impact of the yearly increase in your overall cost. Now, there's a leased fixed contract, which I purchased. It has higher initial cost, but there's no increases for the term of the contract. And again, maintenance is included. And the same as above here, damage is usually covered due to defects in the system, manufacturing defects, or damage due to something such as hail. So I came up with some designs that were solicited by me to these three companies. And the one I chose was Sunrun. And this was typical of all of them in terms of design. They take a Google image of your house and they place the array on it. They figure out how many panels they need to put on there to reach a certain percentage of output. In my case, it was 38 panels, and there was an inside inverter in the basement that converted the power to AC. And my home, again, was heated by gas and propane. Gas for heat and hot water. Central air was electric, and electric range and dryer. Also, I should mention that my house was not due south, but it was pretty close. It was about 15 degrees or so off of due south. Not too many trees in the vicinity of the house. It did have, it was backed up to woods, and they, you know, they were pretty tall, 50 feet, but they were away from the house. So they didn't think that would be a major impact on the solar energy produced. So as I mentioned, I chose Sunrun as my company, and this is part of the contract. This is only a highlight of the contract. It's a summary. The actual contract is probably 20 pages long, and you need to go through every single paragraph and sentence and make sure you understand everything that's in there. If you don't, ask plenty of questions so you understand it completely. So in my situation, I will pay a fixed $85 a month for a 20-year contract based on the system they came up with, the design. The maximum rated power is about 10,000 watts for the system. I think in Massachusetts, if you go over 10,000 watts, you may have a limit on how much you can feed back into the grid for net metering. That's something you may want to check. As we talked about before, many leases include escalation charge. I agreed to a slightly higher monthly payment for a fixed lease payment for 20 years. All maintenance and warranty costs for the system are the responsibility of Sunrun. There's no deposit, no upfront costs. Performance is guaranteed at approximately 10,000 kilowatt hours per year. If less is produced, I'll get a check for the difference at the end of each year. Less a slight degradation factor for solar panels. Solar panels degrade at a slight 1 to 2% a year. I think I did get one check one time when they didn't meet their guarantee. I think that's the only time that happened. All credits and incentives go to the company, which is great for me because I don't have to track them. I don't have to apply for them every year to the state of Massachusetts. And if they go down, I don't care. The system's insured by the company, except for a baseball hitting the panels. So you got to watch out for that. No property tax assessment in Massachusetts because I don't own the system. It's not part of the house. It's leased. The system has an option to purchase after 5 years based on a sliding scale. If you sell your home, the system either has to be paid off or the new owners have to sign the contract and it has to be transferred to them. So this is a picture of the hardware installation. Over on the left here is the SolarEdge inverter. And you might be able to see up in this corner the Wi-Fi antenna that produces the charts and the data and allows you to query the system. Here is a little screen with a menu, and it typically you can cycle through a bunch of menus. This is just one where it shows you the kilowatt hours for the day, the month, the year, such as 662 kilowatt hours for the year, and the total, which in this case was 4.3 megawatts. There's a shutoff here inside, so if one of the people from the company come and they want to work on it, they can shut this off very easily, and that's mandatory. That's part of the code. Also available through the Wi-Fi system and on the web, there's much more detailed information, including graphs on the performance of the system array, including how many panels are working and if they're all working correctly. On the outside of the house is a meter here that was originally put there by the utility, this utility box, but they swapped out the meter to be a net metering meter. And then Sunrun put a meter here, and then they also put the shutoff. So if the power goes out and the workmen are working on the lines, they don't want to be electrocuted by your solar array. So they come over and they shut this off, and it shuts down the power coming out. Also, if you don't have a battery, you can't use the solar panels to generate power for your system or your house if you have a power outage. So this is an important chart. It tells you a lot of information. First thing it tells you is how much you're being charged, or how much your electricity is costing you from the array. And here it's shown to be 9.5 cents a kilowatt hour. Now, that's below what I was paying the utility in 2014 of 19 cents a kilowatt hour. Then you remember it went up to 23 and 25 cents a kilowatt hour. Now it's even farther below what I'm paying now of 25, 30, 35 cents a kilowatt hour. So that's really a no-brainer. It does go down slightly because the degradation of the solar panels. So after 12 years, it goes from 9.5 cents a kilowatt hour to 10 cents a kilowatt hour. So it's not too bad. The monthly payment is $85.11, constant every month for 20 years. That's the same whether it produces 1 watt of power or your array produces 10,000 watts of power. Then this is the guaranteed kilowatt hours that they're guaranteeing you that your array will produce. The first year is 10,751. Second year cumulative would be 21,148, and so on and so forth. And they tell you if it doesn't meet those numbers, then your refund will be this per kilowatt hour, 9.5 cents, 9.6 cents, and so on. There's a prepay option for some reason here if you wanted to prepay some of the lease fee. And over here is the purchase option. Starts out at 30,000. After 5 years, when you have the option to buy, it drops to 11,160, which I have not taken advantage of because I like the idea of the maintenance being performed by the company. This is probably the worst month I've had for performance, or one of the worst months. It was February of 2016. And if you notice down here at the bottom, between the 5th and the 11th of February of 2016, we got virtually no production. The solar production for the whole month was 448 kilowatt hours, which is not a lot. And it was just horrible. And that was because we had an event. And I'll show you what the event is. This was the event, Snowmageddon, in February of 2016. We had a ton of snow, and you can see it was covering the panels. This was my feeble attempt to get the snow off the panels, which was really dumb on my part. I used a plastic roof rake, but it was just too laborious and it wasn't doing much good. I did scrape off some of the snow, and when some of the snow gets uncovered, the panels heat up and it melts faster and it spreads faster, but it's not worth the effort. It really isn't. You can see down here what the snow was like when it didn't melt at all. I also noticed that on a rainy day, production's about 3 to 7 kilowatt hours. A cloudy day, depending on how cloudy it is, can be between 5 and 15 kilowatt hours. But if you have snow, pretty much an inch or greater, it shuts down production. Now, how does that compare with a sunny day? Well, if you had a sunny day in June or July, instead of 15 kilowatt hours for the day, you'd probably get 60. upwards of 60 kilowatt hours a day. So big difference. So this is a chart of my performance from 2015 to 2016. You remember I activated my system in August of 2015, which is right about here. And it took them about, from the time they started until the system turned on was about 4.5 months. But it only took them 2 days to put it together and install it, 2 to 2.5 days. The rest of the time was taken up with getting permits, having inspections, having the utility come out and inspect it 2 or 3 times, having the utility come out, put the meter in, have them do the turn on and the transfer of the account and all this other stuff. So that took about 4 months going back and forth. The building inspector came out, the electrical inspector came out. So it took a while. My average at the time was about, without solar, was about 1,000 to 1,100 kilowatt hours a month. So you can see here in September of 15, I had a balance of negative 35 kilowatt hours because in August there was some production that was being done. October, minus 36. Then my credits ran out and I went back into the positive. So I used 300 kilowatt hours in November, up to 648 in January. It wasn't all that much sun in those months. And then it came down to 370. But still, if my average was 1,000 to 1,100, I thought that was still pretty good. Then March things really started to heat up and I got credits. These are kilowatt hour credits, down to almost 600 kilowatt hour credits. And then in July, it shot up a little bit. It was still negative, but June was a very hot month and I had the central air cranking a lot. And same with July, although not as much. And I started to pay again out of pocket for 66 kilowatt hours. So this is just a sign of a typical curve of the kilowatt hours used by month of the year. And it's been pretty consistent overall. So what about cost? Well, from 2014 to 2016, I tried to track the costs. And you see this, the orange bars here are 2014, well before the system was installed. In September, I had a bill of $361. That was an anomaly because I had a flood in the basement. A pipe broke, and I had a service company come in, and they had these giant heaters on for most of the month. So that's why I got this giant bill. So that was 2014. In 2015, which is here, starting here, in January it was $302, $221, and $237, and down to $247. These bars, by the way, include the Sunrun payment. So the 302 and the 221 and the 211, all of these numbers include the $85 that I'm paying the Sunrun to. Then in 2016, things started to look up. In 2016, I paid only the $85 lease fee in September, October, and March, April, May, June, July. So in those months, I didn't pay anything to the utility. I just paid the Sunrun fee. And even when I did pay to the utility, like 105, it wasn't a lot. Or here was 217, but 85 of that was to Sunrun. So it still was looking pretty good in terms of out-of-pocket costs. So a few years later, in August of 22 to August of 23, I asked Sunrun to produce a report for me on how the system was doing. Now they'll do that for you without any trouble. You just have to put in a request. And what they told me was in the last 12 months, your system produced 10,485 kilowatt hours of electricity. And that's pretty damn close to the exact guarantee that they provided me. They said that the solar rate was 0.1 or 10 cents a kilowatt hour. Well, actually, it was a little less. It was 9.5, but close enough. And that I produced $1,049 worth of electricity. They estimated that my utility rate in the area was 35 cents a kilowatt hour. So without Sunrun, I would have paid $3,670. Now, over here, it shows that in April it was 31 cents a kilowatt hour, but in June it jumped up to 37 cents a kilowatt hour. So I was a little bit more. They estimated I paid $2,621 less for electricity because of the system, which, if I calculated this right, it's about a 30% savings, which still looks like, in 22 to 23, I was still humming along and things were going pretty good. I was happy with it. So I got this off their website for my system. For the calendar year of 2023, I was producing this much power. The total was 10,771 kilowatt hours, which is, again, right on where the guarantee is. So things were humming along again. So then I updated this for this current year of 2024. This is about 9 years after the system was installed. And these numbers here show, the orange bars show the amount of kilowatt hours used over and above what was produced. So for example, in January of 24, I used 488 kilowatt hours more than I produced. But I had a credit of negative $64 from the previous months of production. So I had a credit of minus 320 to start off in November, and then it went down to minus 64. So if you look at this chart, the only time I paid the utility was in February 24. I paid him $33. All the rest of the time, I was just paying the Sunrun lease fee of $85. So right here it summarizes. I paid to Sunrun $85 times 12 months is $1,020. I paid to the utility $33. And so the total I paid for electricity was $1,053. Still right in line what was happening in 22 and 23. In these months, I produced more kilowatt hours than I used. That's why there's no orange bar.
Okay, before we get into the second installation, let's do a recap of the installation on my primary residence. Overall, I've been very satisfied. After 9 years, there's been very little problems with it. I think I saved a bunch of money, and next year will be the 10th year. And if things go as planned, it'll be a total of, I think, $25,000 to $27,000 I've spent, or I've saved actually, on electricity. Partly due to the fact that my house was oriented the right way, close to due south, although not exactly south. The house was a colonial, so the panels were up high. There wasn't very much shading of the panels. And also I got a contract deal which was very good, 9.5 cents a kilowatt hour, which right now I'm paying about 35 to 37 cents a kilowatt hour. So I think overall it's worked out pretty well, and I'm very happy with it. Now, get on to the second installation. My house on the Cape, I've had some problems with that. I picked Sunrun because they did such a great job on my first installation. However, when I went down there to meet them, there was a company there called Bright Planet Solar. I asked them what they were doing. They said Sunrun had hired them to do my installation. I didn't know that when I signed the contract. I assumed Sunrun would be doing it itself, but apparently they don't go to Cape Cod. So they hired this company called Bright Planet Solar. Right from the beginning, I had problems with them. First thing I had a problem with was the way they routed the conduit from the roof down to the outside inverter. The inverter's on one side of the house. It's on the outside in this installation. And they ran it right over the gutter, which was an eyesore. So I mentioned it to them, and after a couple of weeks they fixed it, and they ran it out the side of the house on the roof, and then came down and went under the eave. That was the first problem. Second problem I had was it took them 6 months from the time they started until the activation of the system. Now I understand I had similar problems in terms of permits and waiting for inspections and all that stuff, but it seemed like they were doing stuff 1 week, and then they would disappear for 1 or 2 weeks and not show up at all. Whereas Sunrun in my Norfolk home, they did it in like 2 or 3 days, and it was done. So I had to keep chasing them. I called Sunrun, and Sunrun was chasing them too, to try to find out why they weren't sticking with the job, why they weren't getting it done more quickly. So that extended it out to about 6 months. The next thing I had a problem with was the roof. When they came in, there's a clause in the contract that says they will do an inspection of the roof, and if they find it's unsound, that is structurally unsound, or not in good repair, then they would give me the opportunity to either cancel the contract or wait until I repaired the roof before they installed the solar panels on it. And they were supposed to notify me of the condition of the roof if it was in bad condition. They never did that. So after about I'd say 1.5 to 2 years, the roof started leaking, and it really leaked. It wasn't a small leak; it was a leak. So I called up Sunrun. They had some people come out, take a look at it, and sure enough, they said it was because the roof had failed, and the connections, the brackets that hold the solar panels, weren't waterproofed, and plus the roof was in bad condition. So we went back and forth for about 6 months, and finally I wrote to the CEO of Sunrun, and she got the customer service vice president involved, and eventually they first of all they said they would take the panels off the roof for $700 and replace them, or take them down and then reinstall them after I got the roof repaired. And I said, no, that's not acceptable, because you didn't inform me that the roof wasn't sound enough to put panels on them. And by the way, the roof is guaranteed not to leak for 10 years. That's in the contract. So the customer service representative was very good, and he replaced my entire roof free of charge. They took the panels off. I had the roof replaced. They put the panels back on, and they reimbursed me for everything. They even reimbursed me for painting the ceiling in the house because of all the stains that were there. So ultimately, it was a lot more aggravation, but it worked out. And now I'll show you the details of that in the performance on the house on the Cape.
So this is a synopsis of the contract, or the proposal they made to me for the Cape vacation home. It was agreed to be 10 panels. There was an outside inverter, as I mentioned. The panels were in the back of the house. The orientation of the house was not optimal at all. It was mostly sun in the afternoon. You can see south was this way. Not much sun in the early morning to noontime. The deal was a monthly payment of $40 a month, but this time for 25 years, not 20 years. 10 solar panels and 1 external inverter. The system was rated at 3.1 kilowatt hours, or kilowatts, rather than the 10 kilowatts I had on my primary residence. And this is supposed to produce about 2,600 kilowatt hours a year. And we were guessing at that because I had recently bought the house, and I only had 1 or 2 years of electric bills, and we were only using the house sporadically, mostly in the summer months. So I was a little nervous. We weren't sure exactly what the usage would be in the following years. The home had the same setup as my Norfolk home: gas, heat and hot water, central air, electric range and dryer. I signed the contract in October 19th of 2020. It was installed and went active May of 2021. And this is a picture of the leak that I mentioned before, and it got bigger than this, but this was when it started. And luckily, as I said, Sunrun stepped up to the plate and got this repaired, and got the roof repaired, paid for all of that, and paid for the removal and reinstallation of the panels. So the performance for the Cape House was a little bit different. The performance guarantee was for 2,600 kilowatt hours a year, and the payment, or the cents per kilowatt hour. The price was 18.5 cents. This made me a little nervous too, because this is twice what I was paying for the Norfolk home, just about double. So I had a little concern about this after I signed the contract. So in March of 2023, I asked them to give me a performance report again. And this shows what they produced. This was the Sunrun payment, $40 a month, 12 months. This is what the utility actually charged me per month for those same months. Again, this is April 22 to March 23. And this is what the estimated bill would be without Sunrun. And this came out to be a total savings of $14.05 minus what I was paying to Sunrun and the utility of $10.99, and so I saved $316, which was about 28%. So this kind of lined up with what I had in the Norfolk home, where I was saving about 30%. Now let's look at the cost of electricity. In 2024, I had, this goes from March to November, not a full year, but in March I paid $82 for the cost of the electricity, and in April it was -6. I had a -$6 credit, and -55, -108. So in these months from May to August, it was all negative. It was all credits or negative. And then in September, October, November again, I was paying out of pocket. So as a reference, in March of November of 2020, before I had the system went live, I paid $714 for electricity. The totals, so for the same period of time, but in 2024, I had I had a $35 credit. So Sunrun, I was paying $40 a month times 300 equals 360 for 9 months. The utility I had paid was over that same period of time, I had a negative $35 balance. So I paid $325 for these 9 months. Now I would expect that December, January, February, I will be in the positive, obviously. So that'll go up, but it still looks pretty reasonable, and I think it's going to come out just about the same in terms of a 28-30% saving. So was it worth it? I would say yes. There were more savings in the Norfolk house than there was at the Cape house for a variety of reasons. As I mentioned, we weren't sure of the total usage of power. The Cape house was not oriented that well, but on the other hand, we weren't using it year round, and we're still not using it year round, mostly in the summer months. I would recommend Sunrun. They stood by me, and they did right by me. However, I would not use any third-party contractors from any company, regardless of who your choice is, and make sure you understand that. I would read the contract very carefully and ask lots of questions, especially about guaranteed performance and transferring the system and maintenance. Do the math, make sure it makes sense, make sure you have a southern exposure, and you get at least 6 hours of unshaded sun in the summer for the maximum benefit. You can get by with less than that, but I mean, to maximize your benefit, that's what you really want to look at.
Well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to put in the description below some links to supplemental information and an article I published on this same installation, which has more detail. Hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching, and please don't forget to like and subscribe.